Hi there. You're listening to the Everglade Chronicles, a reading. I'm Garrett Shade, the author. Today I'll be reading Chapter 6, A Message from the Trees. We are about halfway through the story now, and things are starting to culminate for Jessica, or should I say the dark hero Isis. Now let's get started. Saturday evening had come and the meadow was a hive of activity. Sassy Cassie's breakout was the gossip about town, and nearly everyone knew about it. Everyone also knew that a shady character broke her out, wearing all black with pigtails. I giggled as the children of Sunset talked in groups about it. "That's enough about the masked marauder," His Grace yelled. We all quieted, but I couldn't take the smile off my brow. Tonight, the Queen was hosting a gala in the royal city, and I was to attend with His Grace. It was a mid-spring fanfare, a strange welcome to summer gala. In actuality, we had a long weekend coming up, and the Queen wanted to display her prowess and opulence. That evening I wore long black pants and a fitted brown leather blazer with a red tank top underneath. His Grace, the short little Duke, wore a plaid outfit with a small plastic crown and a Halloween king's cloak. I thought he looked hilarious and over the top, but of course I kept my thoughts to myself. "Are we ready to go?" he demanded. I nodded and bowed before him, signaling that the royal party was ready to depart. The royal city had beefed up security around Queen's Summit. As we arrived, there were countless guards about. I hardly thought this many was necessary, but since Isis broke Cassidy out of prison, they couldn't risk it. The Queen's major domo, Schuyler, was walking about in a frenzy. I could hear him yelling orders and flailing his foam sword. The Queen's butler was handing out pink lemonade from a cooler as we approached Queen's Summit. All who was important in the nobility hierarchy would be here, including lesser nobles such as Lady Alice and Lord Kevin. Lord Ashton was prancing about, strutting with his cane. "This is the introduction gala to my royal season," Hudson remarked as we approached the butler. "You must ensure this all goes well for me, Jessica." "You have my assurance, Your Grace." I bowed my head. The butler handed us pink lemonade and the Duke strolled around. The little boy even wore a fake mustache. Pink lemonade, though tangy and bland, was the Queen's favorite. I was left with the other servants, including Cora Hastings. When I looked around, Mark Glass was nowhere to be found. "Oh, hello, Jessica," Cora greeted me nicely. "I'm sure you've heard the latest from the prison?" "Of course." I sipped at my lemonade. It was tart. "I'm always at the cutting edge of news. I am a royal attendant." Cora chuckled and looked out at the mingling nobles. "I heard there is going to be somewhat of a ruckus when the royals are roll called," she whispered. "What sort of ruckus?" I asked. "I have no idea. I heard it from the maids." The roll call was usually unnecessary, but Venus insisted because it gave her more of a royal feel to her parties. When the real festivities began, she would have them all line up at the entrance and come before the throne. Their titles would be introduced and Venus would greet them and thank them for attending. "Is Tyler Crest here?" "He hasn't arrived," the butler said softly. I couldn't help but notice the high amount of guards. The Queen usually kept beefy 8th graders, but there seemed to be more and more at each gala. Soon enough the only guests at her parties would be soldiers. The two she usually kept were posted near her throne, carrying their iconic Halloween axes, Tweedledee and Tweedledum. At every even interval there was a soldier with his little cap and foam sword. There were 3 at the door and 2 at the bottom of the hill. There were even more surrounding the mesa. Schuyler himself had done a good job of securing Queen's Summit. A short while later the mingling came to a halt. Schuyler came and ushered all of the nobles backstage so the Queen could seat herself. The servants, myself included, were told to stand off to the side and wait. Tyler Crest arrived last minute, looking rushed. Mark Glass was with him, and he joined us along the tree line. Schuyler stood near the throne. He would be the name and title caller for the evening. The butler was positioned near him, carrying party favors for the arriving nobles. The assembled guests would watch this awkward display. "Her Grace, Lady Chloe Mountbatten," he said. Chloe strolled out and took her party favor. Her brown hair was done up in nice curls. The ensuing line continued, with Schuyler calling out names and titles. "His Grace, Lord Kevin Cooper, Lord Cloverleaf." "His Grace, the Duke of Sunset." "His Grace, Lord Ashton Smith." "Her Grace, Lady Alice Thompson, Lady Birch." And finally, "His Grace, the Duke of the Lost Forest." By now the room had filled with mingling nobility once more. All eyes were on Tyler, who was new to this whole game. The rest of these aristocrats knew how to play. Tyler fumbled as he walked out and the butler stiffened. He was wearing a red and black plaid shirt with dark denim. His fiery red hair was unusually unkempt. "Thank you for joining us, Your Grace," the Queen gestured. Many thanks, Your Majesty." He bowed. She waved her hand and he tried to move away. Queen Venus smiled as best she could and rose from her chair. "I wish to extend my hand in thanks for all those who could join us tonight for the festivities. We kick off our summer season in health and good fortune, as well as some new blood in our kingdom." It was days before the news reached my ears. Both Cale and Catherine were exploding with excitement, wrestling in the bushes outside Sunset Town. I could almost always detect their presence, for the two of them seemed to favor a scent of verbena. "You two make awful spies," I said, noticing them at once. It also didn't help that their red hair was like a red lobster amongst golden sand. "Out with it." Cale smiled while Cat blushed. "There has been a message from the trees," Cale said eagerly. "What is that supposed to mean?" I asked, confused. "I'll tell you," Catherine said, and so she began the story. In a boast of confidence, the Queen toured Tyler Crest's new land. With her she brought her trusted major domo, the dashing Lord Schuyler. But that was not all, Cale cut in. The Queen was accompanied by many other nobles, including Chloe, Alice, and Ashton. Catherine pushed her twin out of the way. When all was said and done, the Queen proceeded to march home along the beaten path with her entourage of splendor. "Will you please get to the point?" I cut in sharply. "I haven't got all afternoon." "This is the best part." Cale was biting his lip in anticipation. Along that beaten path, even with the guards, acorns flew. Dozens of them, tossed at the Queen and her guards. They were pelted with acorns, cones, and pine needles. The little masked marauders, 10 in total, emerged from the bushes and just attacked the Queen. I gasped and inhaled sharply. Such an attack on the royal body hadn't been seen in years. The last time an attack took place, little Caitlin Hardy was throwing water balloons at King Thomas. "This is truly a message from the trees," I murmured. "A direct hit to the Duke of the Lost Forest, too," Cale nodded. "Have you heard word from Mark, or any claim of who perpetrated this attack?" "It's all still up in the air, I'm afraid," Catherine said. She folded her arms and smiled brightly. "The people of the forest are not impressed with their current ruler, and I suppose it was natural for them to fight the institution. This will not be the last we hear of this." Following the notable incident, the military doubled their power. My little sister would not stop talking about the attack, nor of Cassidy's prison break. The military had failed and everyone's life was on the line. I feared many of them would face execution, even Lord Schuyler. Hudson was racing about when I arrived. It was bright that day, so I wore a summer dress with a floral pattern and my hair in braids. Benjamin complimented the dress when I stepped into the Duke's inner circle. "This acorn attack has me all in a fluster," Hudson ranted. "The Queen has upped security to the nines. I need to equip myself with such protection. Is there any way we can obtain some royal guards? Those guys are tough." "Your Grace is overreacting to an isolated incident," I said calmly. "The people of the forest only attacked the Queen because she was in their neighborhood. They did not directly target her throne. If they wished to do that, they would have at the party last weekend." Hudson rubbed his hands together frantically. "Yes, I suppose, but still. Guards? Yes, guards. We need more muscle out here. What if the farmers revolt? I'll be tossed from my throne." I sighed and turned to Ben. "How long has he been like this?" "Since the news got out," he replied, crossing his arms. "There are more patrols, too, and the Queen is bent on finding out who the masked kids were that threw the acorns. She thinks it was Cassidy and her gang of agents." "I'm quite sure it wasn't them," I replied. In my head, I knew it had to be Mark. It must have been. The kid hated the new Duke and had his own reasons for the attack. "Sassy Cassie is lying low, remember?" "She is a powerful entity," Ben shot back. "She might have had her underlings do it." I sighed again, this time deeper. If I wanted to find out more, I would have to go see my sister. She might not see me right now, what with being so busy and erratic. I had to try. "Your Grace," I said loudly. Hudson stopped being frantic and blinked at me. "I have a sister in the military, if you recall. I could go and ask her what is going on and where the Queen stands, if that is what you wish." The Duke rubbed his hands together vigorously and nodded. "Yes, that is a good idea. Good idea, yes. Very good. Go see your sister and report back to me. Go get me some guards." "Thank you, Your Grace," I bowed lowly. I turned to Ben. You might as well come too. Abby was pacing back and forth with hardly any time to swing on the jungle gym bars. Ryan and the others were busy too, rushing about, gathering swords and shields. The Queen has ordered that the military and the guard triple, Abby said frantically. We are preparing for a war, that is what is happening. A war? Ben asked, stunned. These perpetrators must be stopped, Ryan said loudly. If we do not go to war, then we will never find them. Our soldiers are already disdained in that region. We cannot set up a covert mission without being uncovered. The Queen has given us orders. So what then? A rule of totalitarian delight upon the people of the Lost Forest? I asked sharply. Are you going to detain the citizens like animals, throw down the Duke and assume power? That is classified information that I cannot even reveal to a royal attendant, Ryan said firmly. I doubt appealing to Lord Schuyler would do much either, Ben sighed, shaking his head. My commanders, a young voice said. A lad no older than 10, wearing a plastic hat resembling a soldier's bonnet, was standing firm near the twisty metal of the jungle gym. Lord Schuyler approaches. We've got to go, Abby said to me. I'll see you later at home. Without another word, the ministry emptied. Waves of military diplomats stood outside the gym in a fine attendant line as Lord Schuyler approached with his entourage. Ben and I stood by and watched the exchange. Schuyler was wearing a black Halloween cape, something that made him look more commanding. Attached at his waist was a long foam sword, and, on his head, he wore a cap with a spike. I suppose it is time we return to our village, Ben said with a deep sigh. Nothing we can do now but accept it. If Hudson hears talk of this war, he will still want to support the Queen and look good. Many of our farmers will be called into battle, I said, realizing the damage. It's funny how they call it a war and not actually a battle. Seems to me like the Queen is unsatisfied with Tyler Crest and wants to flush him out with war. That's it, I replied. The Queen is excited for some action. To your weapons, the Queen declares. I could hear Schuyler yelling. He was waving his sword in the air now, and the other teens with him were doing the same. I had to find Cassidy. On the northeastern side of the meadow, there was a small area covered in trees and brush. It was not part of the actual meadow, but part of a natural forest nearby. From Evergreen Street, one could find the walking path and glimpse a view of our Everglade meadow. It was here that Sassy Cassie and her band of merry agents had their hiding spot. While it was well known to most, it was a pain to get to. You had to leave the meadow, walk through a block or two of residential, then find the path, and eventually you'd make it. You had to know where to look, though, because the base was hidden. As I walked, I looked down at my feet. Twigs had been deliberately set so wary travelers or invaders would step on them and make noise. I stepped on one as a test, and I could hear bushes move. Looking forward, I noticed a plastic arrowhead pointing out from some green underbrush. It was aimed right for me. It's me, I said loudly, Jessica Walker. The arrowhead dropped and the bush moved some more. A head poked up and smiled at me. The agent guarding the entrance was a teen I didn't know, but he seemed to know me. Follow the trodden path ahead of you, he told me. Take a left instead of a right. That's where Cassidy is. You'll see her. I thanked him and went along my way. The bush was thick, and as summer was approaching, mosquito and other unwanted insects were crawling around. I walked past a wild rose bush, and it scraped my knee with its thorns. I bit my tongue, and below a large elm was Sassy Cassie. She was seated with, oddly enough, Cora Hastings. They were sitting on old log stumps, talking lowly and sharing bottles of water. I stood there, mortified. Jessica, Cassidy smiled. Come have a seat. What are you doing here? I asked Cora. How did you... I'm so confused. Cora is on the inside, Cassidy explained. She has been an agent of mine for a few seasons now, and she does her job well. Without her, we wouldn't have secrets from the royal court. We were just discussing the prospect of war, Cora said, sipping at her water. I took a seat on a bare stump and crossed my legs. I spoke to my sister just a few minutes ago, I said. The probability of war is now 100%. Cassidy gasped, and Cora swallowed hard. I'm assuming they want to flush out Crest and install a new despot, Cassidy mused. He isn't working out, and it seems the only way for the Queen to oust him is with a siege. I heard Chloe talking about a siege with Ashton at the party on Saturday, Cora said. Since that acorn incident, the Queen is eager to figure out who was behind it all. Tyler cannot control his people and therefore is now useless to the crown. I worry for Mark, I said quietly. We all worry for Mark, Sassy Cassie said nervously. He's a troublemaker, but he's also the true heir of the forest. I wouldn't be surprised if he was the one behind the acorn attack. War cannot be stopped, Cora sighed. If that is what Queen Venus wants, then that is what she will have. And when Tyler is gone, who knows who will sit the Pine Needle throne? I thought to myself for a moment, a long, deep thought. Isis had saved Cassidy from prison, and she was my defiance against authority. Perhaps the shady, dressed in black figure could rally an army. But who would we fight? The people of the Lost Forest were innocent, but they had all been tried the same. To Isis, that just wasn't right. I stood up and smiled. I have to go. The Duke will be wondering where I've gone off to. The walk back gave me very little time to consider matters at hand. Ben was waiting for me at the Cloverleaf Bridge, pacing back and forth like a worrisome puppy. There were guards on the other side, eyeing us warily. They bore the look and equipment of a kingdom at war. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Ben asked timidly. I half nodded and half shook my head. "Somewhat, I suppose. Let's get back to the village." When we crossed the bridge, the soldiers asked for identification. "I haven't heard of such a thing," I said. "I've never needed it before. What is this, a compound on lockdown?" "Do you know who she is?" Benjamin stammered. "Royal attendant to His Grace, the Duke of Sunset." The two guards looked too young to understand, but they nodded. We passed by their checkpoint without much hassle. "You go on ahead," I said to Ben. "I have to go and talk to my sister." Ben nodded and I dipped away into the capital. There were guards everywhere. It was almost like the royal city had become a soldier's outpost. The different classes of soldiers began to show too. Higher-ranked ones wore spiked bonnets. Lower-class ones had no headgear to speak of. Men in Lord Schuyler's regiment had red silk capes. The everyday soldier only had a foam sword. When I reached the ministry, my sister was barely able to speak to me. Men and women were coming in and out of the jungle gym, some of them happily swinging their way out. "I'm glad you're here, Jessica," Abby said. She was leaning over a crude table with scissors and paper. As I looked on, she was creating badges. Each little square of paper had someone's name on it, followed by peer class, grade, age, and title. Those of higher standing were also colored. She handed me my own square. Jessica Walker, aged 14, Royal Attendant, Security Clearance 8. The gentry badges were fluorescent oranges. Commoners had white. The Royals had powder blue. Military members had light green. I could not tell which class the red ones belonged to. "What is this for?" I asked, bewildered. "Her Majesty, on suggestion from Council, has decided to issue identification cards to all active residents. This will stop unwanted people from gaining security clearance to marked off areas. We are trying to diminish possible threats to the Crown," she explained. "By restricting where people can go?" I grumbled. This meadow was supposed to be a free nation where anyone could come and play. This regime is becoming more and more dangerous. Can't you see that, sister? Abby looked at me with a scowl. "Talk like that will land you in jail. Treason is punishable by death. You should know that." "We've made some cards for others in your village," Ryan said, poking out of nowhere. "Take them to their respectable owners." I was handed a pack of small paper squares and I began to flip through them. I was the only one with a higher than 5 clearance. Ben's card was red. "What is this security number?" I asked. Something like that only happened at Area 51 or perhaps in some Call of Duty video game. "Certain areas of the meadow are now being restricted," Ryan informed me. "Depending on your status, you are allowed to enter certain regions. High-risk military areas or testing ranges are restricted to no less than a 10, Abby remarked. "Other than some marked areas, everyone is free to move about the island," Ryan continued. "We also have checkpoints installed on major trade routes to stop another incident like the acorn attack from occurring. It is all for the safety of Her Majesty and her trustworthy subjects." I nodded and left the jungle gym. I glanced at Ben's oppressive red card. Despite possessing such a high title, his number was still 5. The fierce politics had begun. The aristocracy was picking and choosing their favorites. Isis had to be warned, and so did someone else. Sunday night was almost ultimately quiet in the meadow. All the children and the teens had gone home for supper and would have some homework to do. Being the diligent student I was, I had no homework. I paced around a tall birch tree, the tallest in the Lost Forest, dressed as Isis. My glossy hair was strung in pigtails, and my lips were ruby red. "Is someone there?" I could hear a voice ask. "Come forward, Mark," I said quietly. "Someone told me to meet Isis here? Who is that?" "I'm the one you seek," I declared. "I'm the shadowy figure who freed Sassy Cassie." "Who are you really?" A friend, I murmured. For the safety of you and the meadow, my identity must remain a secret. Why did you want to meet me here? I have homework to do, you know. I've been watching the events unfold in the meadow for quite some time now. The acorn strike was only the beginning, and I have a feeling you are the one who committed such an act. It was me, Mark admitted. The Queen needed to know how the lost forest felt. Now I fear there is a war brewing, and I am a target. All I hear about is talk from the capital. If you know what is best for you, you'd make yourself scarce till the flames died down. The last person the Queen needs in her possession is you, Mark Glass. You are the true heir of the forest. If she has you, then she has the forest. She already has the forest, Mark argued. Tyler Crest is her pawn, and he is not a good ruler. Tyler is about to lose the battle. I folded my arms comfortably. He is predicted to fail. What do you mean? Crest isn't working out, and Venus is eager to display her power. She is willing to make an example of the man she put in power like the hypocrite she is. There is a war coming, and the lost forest is about to shed blood. You must leave, go into hiding. She will try and blame the whole thing on you. Because I am the last claim to the Pine Needle throne, Mark said. It was all making sense now. If Venus wrapped him up in her little game, then the forest would be forfeit to her. Gabrielle's will would be further torched, and her supporters would no longer flock to Mark. Thank you, Isis. You are the meadow's hero. I smirked. I am merely looking out for those I care about. That concludes Chapter 6, our readings for this week. What a wild chapter this has been. Join me next time when we start Chapter 7, There Will Be Blood. I hope you have been enjoying your fall. I know I have. Have a nice week. Shimmer by Captures provides the music. Find us online on Facebook by searching The Everglade Chronicles or at Everglade Chronicles on Instagram. I appreciate your support. If you're interested in purchasing any of the Everglade Chronicles novels, you can find them exclusively on Amazon. Thank you and see you next week.